Welcome to the Three Things Podcast. I'm David Iglesias, Director of Wheaton Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics. You may be wondering why this podcast is called Three Things. You were probably taught by your parents, like I was, that it was impolite to talk to people about three things: religion, politics, and money. But what happens if your job is to talk about those three things? Well, let's find out. Today's guest is Stephen R. Smith, Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer, Amstead Industries Incorporated. Mr. Smith joined Amstead in 2005 as President of Amstead Rail, became General Counsel in 2007, was appointed President and Chief Executive Officer in 2017, and added the role of Chairman of the Board in 2018. He began his professional career in 1982 at the Chicago law firm of Hopkins and Sutter, since merged into Foley and Lardner, where he was a corporate partner and chairman of the Corporate Transactions Group. Mr. Smith earned an AB degree in political science from Wheaton College with highest honor and his JD from the University of Chicago Law School. Mr. Smith is a member of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Chicago. He previously served on the board of elders at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church in Warrenville, Illinois, where he chaired the Finance Committee. He lives in Chicago with his wife, Linda. They have 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren. Well, first, let me welcome you to the Wheaton Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics, our Three Things podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, David. Thanks for having me. I admire the work that the Faith, Politics, and Economics group does.
Well, thank you very much. I remember meeting you, I think, at a breakfast a few years ago, and then more recently at a dinner. But I was struck by a comment you made when we were just speaking at the dinner about a man who was retiring from your company. You said something to the effect that the gentleman who retired did not have a high-level job, but he was retiring with a large retirement. I then asked if that was standard operating procedure for your company, and you said it was, that everyone in the company owned some of the company. So I guess my first question is, how common is it for companies to be owned by employees?
So I'll answer that in terms of a few numbers, David. There's 6,500 ESOPs in the United States right now with 1.6 trillion in assets and about 14 million participants. And there's really 2 kinds of ESOPs. There's public company ESOPs, and often those are just a sort of supplementary retirement plan. So people have a chunk of the company, but they don't really own the whole company. But then there's also about 5,800 private ESOPs, and that's what Amstead is, where we are 100% owned by our employees and workers. And there's about 2 million participants throughout the country who are in that kind of ESOP, and it has about 200 billion in assets in those ESOPs. So it's not a huge part of society, but it's a growing one, and it's the one that I think addresses some of the societal issues that we're all dealing with in terms of wealth inequality and the fact that people with the capital tend to fare better than those who are dependent on wages. Well, we love our structure because not only do our workers get the fruits of their labor, they get the fruits of the capital as well.
Wow. Well, I think I can figure out what ESOP is. I'm sure our listeners too, but can you tell us exactly what an ESOP is?
Employee Stock Ownership Plan is what it stands for. And when ERISA was created back in the 70s, the then chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Russell Long, was actually a believer in ESOPs. He thought it was a great concept. He had been influenced by a gentleman by the name of Louis Kelso, who was a political economist. And lo and behold, because of that influence, the ESOP structure made its way into ERISA, and it was strengthened by subsequent legislation. When I'm with members of Congress, I tell them, this is one thing you've done right. You guys don't get enough credit, but this is something that has really worked, and it's worked to really enhance the respect and dignity of a lot of people and give them really good retirements.
Well, I'm sure they hear it when people are critical, so it's good of you to tell them that they have done at least one thing right here. Let me ask you this. What are some pros and cons of having employee ownership?
Well, I think the pros are just tremendous on a cultural standpoint. I mean, when not many people bother to wash a rented car, right? But when you own something, you have a different attitude towards it. And the fact that everyone I'm with every day is a fellow owner, that really changes the game and changes the culture of the company. The other pro is, our people, we've made 2,500 millionaires since we've been an ESOP. And people who
Wait, let me interrupt you here. 2,500.
Yes.
Oh
And
my, okay.
And these are people who are working tough jobs in foundries, pouring hot metal, and yet they can retire after 35 years of service and have $1 million or more in their account. And so it's really a very gratifying structure in that way as well, too. And the other thing I'll say is that from a societal standpoint, as I hinted, I think it's a piece of capitalism that really works. When I'm on Capitol Hill with members of Congress from both parties, for the Republicans, it's the ownership society. For the Democrats, it's almost socialism. And so we have strong bipartisan support, and they love the structure. And it's something that Chuck Schumer always says to me, Senator Schumer, how come there aren't more of these? And and I say, well, one reason it takes a paternalistic owner who really wants to pass his company on to his employees and let them take over the ownership. And so, but they are growing as more and more people become aware of ESOPs as well.
Well, and as we were talking before the recording, you and I are both alumni of the International Study Program that the Bartels, Mr. Bob Bartel ran in the 70s here at Wheaton. And I'm continuing that legacy, hopefully. I am visiting Scandinavia this coming summer in part because Norway I view as a gigantic ESOP in which everyone buys into and owns a bit of Norway, and they're taken care of for their entire life. So they would say they're not socialist, that they are a capitalist-based economy, but there's a significant welfare state. And it seems like what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Steve, is there is ownership, but there's also significant benefits to this ownership.
Absolutely. I mean, it's ownership that people benefit from. And I always say it changes the way management behaves too. The ESOP from a legal standpoint is structured as a trust. It's a trust with the earnings of the company for the benefit of the employees. Well, the trust is a legal structure, but it's also a way that we as management view what we do. A lot of CEOs, to be honest, do things for their own ego or do things for the press clippings, or they do things because they have to be responsive to quarterly analyst calls all the time. I mean, we run this company in a way that we understand that we're running it for our fellow employees and for their retirements. And you have to take risk in business, and you have to take smart risk, but you also can't take imprudent risk when you know that you're playing with the retirement of all the people around you and that you work with the other day. So I think it really provides a mature, caring management that does things for the benefit of the employees.
Do you think you have a extra fiduciary responsibility to your employees than in a non-ESOP company?
I do feel that I cannot be careless. I cannot be careless with their futures. And so, I have the normal legal fiduciary, but there's also a culture of trust, which I feel, and it also requires me, frankly, to be very authentic and transparent with my employees as well, too, because they are my owners, too. They're the people I respond to. And, we're actually structured, not all ESOPs do this, but all our ESOP participants every year get to vote on the entire board. They get to vote on me every year.
Oh, no kidding. That's fascinating.
And, that obviously imposes a little accountability on me as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Is this a more uniquely American structure for a company, or do you see this in other countries as well?
It is most prevalent in America. There are pieces like it in other places. England, there's a retailer by the name of John Lewis that has been organized in sort of an employee trust for a long period of time. And they're actually struggling with, as all retailers are right now, but they had a long run of providing excellent careers for their people while being owned by an employee trust. So there are shades of it other places, but it is predominantly an American vehicle so far.
And have you found that certain types of businesses lend themselves more readily to ESOPs than others?
I anticipated that a little bit, so I looked at the stats on that a little bit, and about 20% of the ESOPs are manufacturing companies, and then about 20% are professional services kind of companies, engineers, architects, and then there's a lot in retail groceries. For some reason in the United States, it's evolved in the retail grocery industry, so companies like Winco and Wawa are also ESOP owned, for example. Depending on what region of the country you're from, you might recognize some of those names. So it cuts across various industries without a doubt. And I find that sometimes I think it spreads like word of mouth. Construction, a lot of construction companies are structured as ESOPs too. And I think part of that is, competitors sort of share the experience with each other, and it spreads that way as well.
And I've gone on your company website, so I've got an idea of what Amstead does, but could you tell our listeners, what does Amstead do?
So we really have four primary businesses. Our history goes back to 1902 in rail in Granite City, Illinois, near St. Louis. There's still a foundry that produces rail castings today, and it's been doing that since 1902. And in rail, if you see a freight car in the United States, the entire undercarriage of that freight car is our product, the wheels, the bearings, the entire truck or bogie as it's called, everything that connects the cars. That's our material. So I always told my kids, when you get stuck at a rail crossing by a train going by, don't complain, just go cha-ching, because that's
the sound of money going by, right?
Exactly. And then we're in the commercial vehicle or truck. If you look at the big Class 8 trucks on the road, if you pass one of those, that's going to be our comment as one of our businesses, Consolidated Metco, and the hubs on that truck connecting the axle to the wheels and the plastic interiors, those are probably all ours as well too. And then automobiles, if you drive a GM or a Ford or numerous other nameplates, probably part of your transmission was created by one of our companies as well. And finally, the evaporative cooling industry. If you see big buildings anywhere, hotels or at airports, you'll see a blue circle with BAC in it for Baltimore Air Coil. And around the world, it's the leading evaporative cooling company, which provides very energy efficient cooling augmentation to major cooling systems as well. So those are our four businesses. We're about a $4 billion company altogether among the four. So.
And how many employees do you have globally?
Around the world, we're about 17,000 employees right now. And about 9,000 of those are ESOP participants. They're the ones who own the company. One thing that has, as we become more of a global company, how to spread the benefits of the ESOP to other parts of the world where they don't have the same tax structures that we do has been one thing that has challenged us. But we've been able to create sort of phantom plans tied to our stock price so that we share that culture and those benefits around the world, even for those foreign employees who are not technically part of our ESOP structure.
Very well. So this is a global company, and with regard to the first company you mentioned that was founded, Granite City, 1902, would this be what used to be called a heavy industry? Because you're making things that are steel.
Heavy industry. I mean, you're taking scrap metal, you're melting it at 2,000 degrees, you're pouring it into molds, either graphite molds or sand molds. And, that's the kind of industry that people don't realize still goes on in America, but is still there. And we think, frankly, the ESOP structure has enabled us to survive and still be competitive in America with those businesses.
Well, absolutely. And I forget the percentage. I'm sure you know this, Steve, but the percentage of freight that gets moved in this country by rail?
It's about 40%. So, we're a little agnostic because we're on the truck side too. So
okay.
we can win either way, but there's no doubt rail is still the most energy efficient way of moving freight, without a doubt.
You bet. And how much competition do you have? Are there other companies that make the undercarriages for the trains?
There are, but a lot of that is foreign competition. A lot of it comes from China. Actually, a little bit comes from Russia, sort of timely in today's day. So we are clearly the largest U.S. provider of everything we provide as well, too. So there was great consolidation in the rail industry back in the 80s and the 90s, and we came out as sort of the largest survivor out of all that. So.
Okay, and you said Russia. So, and given the events of this past week or so, how did the Russian invasion of Ukraine affect Amstead?
It's a mixed bag, really. We have, over the last 15 years, begun to build a very good rail business in Russia, specifically selling rail bearings. We have a joint venture partner there, and frankly, whether that's going to survive in these next few days is in question. And obviously, it's difficult to. There's people you've built relationships with there, and there's a business you've invested a lot of time and dollars into, and it's difficult to walk away from that. On the other hand, there is product that's imported from Russia into our business as well too, and some of that I think probably will not be imported, which probably could help our market shares a little bit going forward as well. So it's a mix, but on a human level, it's a difficult situation without a doubt.
Well, sure, and you've been CEO now during COVID. So tell me what it's like to lead a $4 billion revenue global organization during a global pandemic, and any supply chain issues that you may have experienced.
Yeah, some people say, gee, it must have been really difficult during that time. Well, when COVID first hit, frankly, it was easy. You were entirely focused on one thing, survival, and just making sure you had the cash to keep going and that somehow you were responding to the circumstances. But then things came back a little more quickly than everyone expected. And what happened then, of course, the supply chain couldn't keep up. And so it's an unusual circumstance where the underlying demand for our businesses is out there, but our customers and the supply chain just can't support it. And so we're doing well. We've survived COVID better than we would have ever expected. But on the other hand, you sort of have the feeling that there's been a missed opportunity here to really capitalize on what people want: more cars. They need more trucks to be moving goods. They just can't be built at this point because of microchips and other supply issues, and labor. It's just been difficult getting the labor that's necessary. So it's been an unusual time. We've survived well. We're doing well, but also you look forward to the time when we can have a little more normal world as well.
Absolutely. Well, I experienced that myself. My wife and I purchased our first new vehicle in, at least 10 years now. And we were told we might have to wait for 6 months. We ended up waiting 3 months, but according to our salesperson, he said, "Hey, I've been in this business a long time. I've never seen this before, but you're just going to have to wait." So I think Benjamin Franklin said patience is a virtue. So we were working on our virtue of being patient.
Right.
So let me ask you this, just a few more questions. I appreciate your time because I know you're very busy running the company. But can you tell us how your Christian faith affects the way you conduct business?
Well, particularly during COVID too, it was important with everything going on, with so much uncertainty, to be able to be a little bit of a beacon of hope and calm for our people. And obviously, our faith sends us in that direction, doesn't it, David? Anyway.
Yes.
And to the extent that you could be that example, then that I could provide leadership in understand. I remember one story I told our people early on. I said, I was on virtual church. We go to Covenant Presbyterian up in Chicago, up in Bucktown area. Mm-hmm. And we were on a live stream service, and there was no one in the congregation at all. And our pastor and music director were up there, and you saw the empty pews behind them while they were doing a service. And I said, part of me, I said to our team, it broke my heart. I missed the worship. I missed my fellow parishioners. But at the same time, it made me focus on the fact that even with everything going on now, we're part of something bigger and much more important and with much more meaning in life. And so to be able to convey that hope throughout an organization of 18 people and to draw on my faith as the basis for offering it, that was very informative, I guess. And it really shapes. We also emphasize in this company the value of the person and treating people with love, dignity, and respect. And obviously that all draws on our faith background as well.
Well said. Thank you for sharing that. And you and I are both lawyers, both legally trained. You went the corporate route. I went the criminal justice military route. I like to tell my students that getting a Juris Doctor is a utility degree. You can do any number of things. but could you tell us how did you get into the business of running a large company, given your legal background?
Yeah, it's not that I had some grand plan actually, but I was always interested in the business side of things, David. Unlike you, I spent a summer clerking where I did litigation, and I thought, man, I don't want to be fighting with people all the time. And so I ended up on the corporate side, but whenever I was involved, I did a lot of private equity, venture capital work, and I was always very interested in the business aspects. I didn't limit myself to just the legal aspects. I wanted to understand everything from a business standpoint. And I always tell people, young people, I say, don't limit your scope of learning. Try to learn as much about everything as you can, which is part of my liberal arts background at Wheaton College, I might add, too. And taught that by people like Mark Amstead and Bob Hartel and good professors like that. So as I went on, and I then went in-house to a diversified corporation, and there I was given the opportunity to do more than just the legal role. Ended up with a British company, was given responsibility for shared services throughout the United States. And then one of my old bosses needed someone to run a company and gave me that opportunity. So I've always inserted myself into the business side of things, always had interest in it, and it was just sort of a natural transition from doing a lot of corporate business-oriented law.
Excellent. Well, as a Wheaton graduate, what aspects of your Wheaton education you believe prepared you best to run Amstead?
People tend to bash the liberal arts nowadays. I'm still a believer that some of the most successful people, look, success in business is all about people ultimately and understanding the bigger framework. And I remember Roger Lundeen, the late Roger Lundeen, who taught at Wheaton, once told me that he found that Wheaton students get to the ultimate question most quickly, and understanding the ultimate question in life helps how you analyze every situation, and I think that leads to success. And then the other thing you and I talked about before we climbed on this podcast is the international exposure through my political science and history education at Wheaton, through the international study program. I told you I spent a week in the Soviet Union in 1977 as a Wheaton student as part of the ISP program. And then there I was back there, 20 years later in a free society at that time, negotiating deals, negotiating a joint venture. I mean, the experience I had in Wheaton and in the international study program was just invaluable for shaping what was really a global view from that point forward.
Amen to that. Final question is this. Is there any question I should have asked you that I did not ask you?
One thing I always tell people here, have fun what you're doing too. And so you could have asked me whether I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm at the age now where one could begin to think about retiring, but I'm having fun. And it's
well said. And I'm in the same position. I retired from the Navy because I had to in 2014, but I'm having the time of my life here at Wheaton College, teaching bright young minds who are hopefully helping advance the kingdom a little forward. Mr. Smith, thank you so much for your time. Blessings on you and your family.
Thank you, David. I enjoyed it.
You have been listening to Wheaton's Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics podcast. 3 Things with host David Iglesias. Join us again in 2 weeks for a new interview with an accomplished faith, political, and business leader.